So here we are at part 2 of our fix of the Zorki 3 slow speed mechanism. So we've looked under the top cover in part 1 and what we found was that the trouble didn't lie there, so it must lie in the slow speed mechanism, which on this camera is Leica style down at the bottom here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take off the body shell and we're just going to have a little look inside and clean up what we can within the camera and free up any dirt or anything we can see that's making those speeds a little sticky. So we'll take off the lens to begin with. I have been asked why bother repairing this camera. Well, firstly, it's a lovely old bit of technology and I do enjoy getting old technology into working order. Secondly, this one is in such nice condition that I think it's not been used very much. It really is nearly mint, and it's worth a little bit of servicing just to get it working as it should. Next thing we'll do is loosen the screws that hold the body shell onto the camera. So we've got to loosen 2 screws here, one here and one here. So these 2 here, and looking around the back there are 3 screws here, 1, 2, 3, that we've got to loosen off, and then we'll be able to take the body shell out. So now let's take off the back. So this should now separate. It can be a little tricky. Okay, it appears I've been a little daft and then I've forgotten to undo these screws here. So that would make a difference to the proceedings. Let's now see, and there we are, that's beginning now to separate. So we'll just do it side by side, one side by one side. So very gently ease it off. And there is our body shell and our denuded and naked little Zorki 3. What's become apparent is that that baffle plate is going to be very tricky to get off. So I'm going to try and clean this mechanism without taking any of the baffle off. And see if we can just clean up the mechanism without actually taking anything off. So here is the plenty of lighter fluid going in there. This stuff does evaporate, so if we get a little bit on the mechanism. It's not necessarily a dreadful loss. Now that actually is working much nicer now. Let's get a drop more in there. So tip it out the other end. That's running quite freely now. And then finally the D, which is the time setting. And that's now working nicely. Good, okay. So let's get some more of the juice through there. As the fluid's making its way from the mechanism to the other side of the camera body, it's coming out of this corner here. There's quite a lot of dirt coming out. So let's give it another little go. Okay, so we appear now to have a more or less functioning little Zorki 3. Let's just check those speeds again. So there's 1/25. Here is 1/5. Perhaps a little longer than 1/5, but more or less. Here is 1/2. That sounds about right. 1/10. Perhaps a little long. But time is relative, as Professor Einstein tells us. And here's 1 second. And that does now indeed appear to be working fairly well. Here's the time setting. So that stays open until we, same as the Leica, move the lever, the dial rather, around. Okay. So we appear to have successfully, at least for the time being, cleaned the Zorki 3 slow speed palette. So that is a very good result. I couldn't have hoped for better. All that remains to do now is lubrication. So we've got to be very, very careful with lubrication. The slow speed mechanism must not be oiled. No oil must go anywhere near the slow speed mechanism. So the gears that I can see to lubricate are this large gear set down here. And I'm going to put literally a drop, a very small drop on the end of this screwdriver onto this gear set here, and hope that that is sufficient for its requirements, and indeed isn't too much. So let's get a little drop of oil on there. And when I say a drop, I mean the tiniest drop. And very cautiously let us wind that around. put another tiny little spot on the next portion of the gear set here. Just to make sure that they have some lubrication. Any machine run dry is unlikely to stay the course for very long. I'll just fire it off a few times to distribute that. Other points to lubricate while we have everything undone. There's a gear set up the top here that takes the power from the winder to the shutter mechanism. So we'll give that a drop of oil, and I do mean just a drop. Tiniest amount, we don't want too much on this camera, but by the same token we don't want too little either. No machine should run dry and without oil unless it's specifically designed to run that way, and these cameras are not designed to run without oil. They do require some lubrication. While we're at it, let's put a little drop on this bearing. That's the bearing that takes the force of the whole force of the mechanism, so that must have some oil. And we'll also get just a little tiny bit on this remaining part of the gear train here. That's the bit that sits just above the film driver here, this sprocket mechanism. I'm delighted to say the shutter still appears to be working as it should. And I really am delighted. When I say delighted, I really do mean delighted, because this is a lovely old machine. And it would be such a shame to not to restore it to its absolute peak of working if one can. And it does appear that we have had some success in achieving that, much to my pleasure. Okay, so I'll just run through that those speeds once again. So 25th I know is working. Here's a 5th. Slightly slow, but time is relative. I don't know if that's what Professor Einstein had in mind, whether he was thinking of old Zorki cameras. Nevertheless, time is going to have to be relative, because these are very old machines now. Even when they were new, frankly, I doubt that anybody could really guarantee the absolute accuracy of the speeds, because they are mechanical mechanism, and a mechanism of this sort is an approximation, and I guess that's a feature of all analog technology, the notion that in fact it is an approximate, or rather an approximation of what it's trying to capture, what it's trying to represent. So how good should these speeds be? Well, good enough, I think, is the answer. Good enough, and that is certainly good enough for me. I am very pleased indeed with that result. So, without further, let's pop this lovely old thing back together. So there we have a working Zorki 3 camera from 1955 in mint condition with, I hope, slow speed set up and ready to go. Let's try them once again. So we've got 1/25th, check, 1/5 of a second, check, 1/2 of a second, check, 1/10 of a second, oh yes, and 1 entire whole second. Ha! Excellent. And finally the time setting. Shutter stays open, turn the dial, shutter closes. Fantastic. And if you've stuck with this video for this long, well done. And it's now time for me to go and take a little break, put my feet up, have a cup of tea, and wait until the next job. Cheers everybody for looking in. I do very much appreciate everybody who watches these videos. I have a little bit of fun making them, and I love this old technology, and I'm committed to celebrating it and keeping it working. So thanks for tuning in everybody. Tune in again next time for some more analog fun. Cheerio.